There.
All right, great. We see you guys have a great setup. All right, so we have 5 more minutes, so we'll just wait a bit.
Sure.
Ben, you there? Yeah, I was going through your bio. You're in the Philippines, right?
Yep.
Where in the Philippines?
Metro Manila, Quezon City in particular.
Oh, nice. Been there a couple of times.
Yeah, it's a bit crazy again with the pandemic here. We're going on
Oh, yeah.
granular lockdown. So
Can you guys going out of home and all, or things open?
some things are open, but we have curfew, and
Oh, okay.
some streets are on lockdown. But not the entire city yet. I'm hoping
It's
it
hard
doesn't
these days.
it doesn't get to that.
So you do stuff related to geospatial fields.
Yeah.
What is it like? That sounds pretty interesting.
Mostly remote sensing and GIS stuff. Especially open source GIS like GRASS, QGIS, and things like that.
Nice. Is it open source, like the entire thing?
No. Yeah. It's an open source GIS, Q, GRASS as well.
Nice. Maybe you can post the link so people can have a look.
Yeah. Let me go to the chat.
Yeah. Oh, so you have your projects here?
Yeah, some of them.
Nice. Very interesting. All right, I think I'll just get started. Let me go back here. All right, so Ben is a free and open source advocate based in the Philippines who works in the intersections of openness, data development, and geospatial fields. He's an alumnus of the School of Data Fellowship and Data Expert Program and has provided training support and consulting services on data literacy and free open source software for geospatial FOSS4G applications to individuals, private corporations, and organizations over the years. And he's going to give us a talk about putting openness at the heart of smart cities and communities. Please go ahead, Ben.
Yeah. Thank you, Marco. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for being here. And also, thank you so much for the FOSSASIA team for having me, and for the Linux Professional LPI for also inviting me. My presentation will be about putting openness at the heart of smart cities and communities, our experience with smart city. So it won't be overly technical, but I would like to just share with you guys what we've been doing and what we've learned in our experience here in the Philippines. So yeah, my name is Ben. I like to consider myself a geospatial generalist. I'm an open stuff advocate and a data activist and activist. I like to think that I've had an holistic learning experience from several fields, which is why I get to work on their intersections. I wear a lot of hats. I have my consultancy, as mentioned by Marco, BNHR, where I provide spatial and data solutions using open technologies. I also currently serve as the data training lead for the Open Knowledge Foundation, where we look towards building a fair, free, and open future. And for this presentation, I'll mostly be wearing my CTO hat for Smart City. If you want to learn more about myself, what I do, and the organizations I'm affiliated with, you can check me out online, benhor07b or bnhr.xyz. About Smart City, the organization that I'm part of, we're the first tech nonprofit in the Philippines and somewhat of a pioneer in the smart cities field. Unlike most of the, or some of, not most of the other organizations or tech companies in the field, we really aren't as focused on, the high technology stuff like blockchain, AI, ML, IoT, things like that. But what we want to do is build a culture, basically create a movement that transforms the way we think, the way we do, and especially the way we plan smart cities and communities. We thought about this because we figured the context of a developing country like the Philippines is probably different than the context of an already developed country. So we do this by using a co-developed citizen-centric approach that puts openness and citizens, basically people, at the heart of the development. So we want to move the arrow of the conversation from something that's purely technology and applications based to something that talks about people and that talks about openness right from the get-go. So what is it about smart cities that make it an interesting field to work in? Well, for one, we can actually say that there's currently no universal definition of what a smart city is and what to do to create a smart city. So it's way open. However, in one of our researches in smart city, we were able to determine to find out some common goals, principles, and threads that connect the different schools of thought of smart city development. Usually this involves in enhancing or improving the citizens' quality of life, providing high quality services, enhance social participation, informed decision making, and of course the innovative use of technology. This is an excerpt from one of our researches. Here you can see that what a smartest city is really dependent on who you ask, and the key concept and keywords and principles there is also dependent on what kind of category or from what perspective the person or the organization you ask is. The academic point of view is different, the corporate point of view is different, the industry and government point of view is also different. So it's really interesting to work in this field right now because there's a lot of things that we can do, a lot of things that we can solve, and it's a global thing. You can look at so many countries all already doing smart city initiatives, And the same is the case here in the Philippines, actually. Um, from our research, there's been so many smart city initiatives in the Philippines from way back from 2012, 2013. Uh, Here you see the Digital Cities Initiative 2025, Baguio City, Makati City, all eyeing to become smart cities, quote unquote. Here are just again an excerpt, some examples of from our research. What you can see here, what you can actually notice is that most, if not all, of these initiatives are very tech oriented, all about providing free Wi-Fi for all, um, you know, improving the CCTV system, and then increasing the BPO industry and other things like that. There's nothing wrong with that, although it's a bit concerning for us at Smart City when we notice that the current initiatives in the Philippines revolving around smart city and the conversation about smart cities are one, too technology centric. The mentality, the conversation is usually goes like, oh, we're a smart city, so we need to have this application. Or it's like, okay, now we have this application, so we can call ourselves a smart city. We've seen that most of the time the conversation around smart cities revolves around these technologies and applications. And it's also been a bit too focused on already developed or these high income local governments and communities, what we call the first class municipalities, the highly urbanized cities and the first class cities. Uh, that's a bit concerning because more than half of the population in the Philippines also live outside of these. They live in municipalities. We have third class, fourth class, fifth class municipalities, and the budgets of these municipalities are nowhere near the budgets of those highly urbanized first class cities, which makes it difficult for them to replicate what it is that's currently being done. In a sense, this difficulty of replication is um, made more difficult and compounded by the fact that most of the initiatives we found were standalone initiatives, meaning one city could be doing one thing, another city could be doing the same thing, but their data and their technologies aren't interoperable. This isn't just the case for smart city initiatives. A very real and close example would be contact tracing initiatives in my country, in the Philippines. Although there are cities that have interconnected contact tracing apps, there are also that's not the rule. That's more of the exception. The rule is mostly each municipality, each city has its own contact tracing app developed for itself, and then you have the national government, which also has a contact tracing app that it's mandating, and that makes it difficult to actually do the contact tracing to mix together all those data sets in one. And yeah, it's further compounded by the fact that there's not a lot of documentation as to these initiatives from way back. As again, from our research, we've seen that since 2012, 2013, there's been talk of smart cities in the Philippines. But when you actually try to look at documentation for these projects, how are they doing now? What are the best practices, pitfalls that they have? It's sort of difficult to look for resources, and again, that makes it equally difficult for other communities who'd want to replicate what they're doing. And lastly, there's somewhat a lack of involvement of citizens at the different stages of the development. So it concerns us at Smart City because these current trends of over reliance in apps, although we agree that its adoption is beneficial, we would like to, as I've said, move that conversation so that we always consider the state of the culture of data and technology in the community being created smart, the literacy of these communities, making sure we appropriate resources and prioritize that development, making sure that we engage and consult with the public early and regularly, and of course, making sure that there are safeguards so that the data, the tech, the services remain fair, free, open, and interoperable, even beyond specific project. Which brings me to the smart city approach and experience. What we've noticed over almost 2 years of working on this field, and what we want to do further. Uh, and hopefully we can have more allies after this and have people replicate what we're doing. We have our core values. We value openness and interoperability. We believe in things being open by default. We believe in free as in freedom. We believe that our project should be fair, collaborative, and inclusive. And consent is key. We want to be as responsible and transparent as we can in our in our in our projects, because we want to limit, if ever, any harm that can be done with projects that we'll be doing. And of course, security, resilience, and projects being financially sustainable. So we do this to several things. We focus on several things. The first one is the focus on data literacy and not so much just data science. So what I mean by this is, when I talk about data literacy, it involves not just skills, but also knowledge, attitudes, and social structures that allow for different people to use data. Because the fact of the matter is, data literacy is not just data skills. You can not have data skills but still be data literate. It depends really on what kind of person you are and what your role is in your organization or in your community. For example, a top level executive, a decision maker, usually does not have as much data skills as someone who's actually working with the data directly, but they still need to be data literate enough to know if the data that is being shown to them is speaking truthfully or is it being used to mislead them. So by focusing on data literacy, we try to empower people, not only with skills, of course, but especially with a confidence and a very safe environment so that they can hone their skills and they can also share their work. This is because we believe that the field of data should be inclusive. It should be painfully inclusive, so that no single person, department, or organization has monopoly over it. I like to say that the field of data is, it's far too important just to be left to data scientists. Everyone should have a say on, and everyone should have the means to work with data. The next thing we focus on is being open by default, and uh, telling people about the philosophy of free as in freedom. Of course, a lot of us here probably know what open means. Just so just the short definition of review from the open definition, it means that anyone can freely use, modify, access, and share for any purpose that thing, be it data, be it hardware, be it software. So we believe in openness, which is why part of our projects and programs are advocating and lobbying for an open data policy, and not just the current freedom of information approach that we have here in the Philippines. So as a background here, we have an open data portal, but since it doesn't have as much data as we would like, most of the data requests in the Philippines are coursed through the FOI portal, where you have to request data from the data provider. And of course, we argue that most of these data sets that they're requesting should be open by default, especially those that funded by public money, and at the same time those that aren't necessarily protected or exempted by statutes or by the Constitution. At the same time, we would like to raise awareness and introduce people not just to the philosophy, but also to the advantage of choosing openness, choosing open source, choosing open data, choosing open tech. Um, from some of our experiences, the probably the main reason why people don't normally choose open source isn't because it's bad. It's mostly because they're not aware that the alternative exists. And by bringing the open source to them, bringing the openness to them, we try to give them these alternatives, that instead of getting bootleg versions of software, or resorting to something illegal, there are these options that you have, and there's this really vibrant and wonderful community around it, that we can be a part of. So that's another thing that we want to focus on when working with projects and when looking for partners. The next thing is about community building and co-development. We, as much as we can, we put people before systems. Whenever we have a partner who's a local government, for example, we don't come in with a cookie cutter solution. We don't come in with something already built. As much as possible, the solutions will be tailor fit to those people that actually have problems that need solving. Uh, we're not uh, we're not a solution looking for a problem. We are problem solvers looking for problems to solve. And then leveraging the power of the people. One of the examples of this is one of our projects is Mapatanda. It's a mapping project utilizing OSM for mapping features in OpenStreetMap that are relevant to the aging population, to older people, to senior citizens. And with that, we partner directly as well with organizations and the senior citizens themselves to try to get them to map these places. And of course, building grassroots communities around open data and open source, as I mentioned earlier, what we would like is to introduce open source to people and have it grow, natively and genuinely within the communities. And lastly, we believe in culture, policy, and institutionalization. We don't look at projects as individual projects, or we don't look at projects on a project-to-project basis. We believe there are no shortcuts, and that building a culture of openness would require, a lot of things. So we always look at the big picture, and you'll see in the next slide about the stumbling blocks and learning experiences that we've had. But yeah, for us, both the journey and the destination are worth it. And yes, just some challenges and barriers from our experience working on opening smart cities and stuff. The very first thing is the difficulty of open data. Sometimes people think that so long as you release it, it's open. So machine readability is one thing that needs to be discussed more in the conversation. We need machine readable data sets to actually work with data. And these has happened quite a lot for me working here in the country. And also, again, the somewhat mix up between what FOI, freedom of information, is and open data, which leads to the next problem really, which is we have a reliance on data requests in the Philippines to access data. It's more common that a data provider would ask you to request data sets instead of just sending you to a portal to download it directly. So it gets really difficult, especially if you need a lot of data sets and they're not necessarily required to give it to you because they have the final say if they would release it to you or not. And again, data providers not really being as open in terms of releasing machine readable data sets. Mostly you would work with PDFs and sometimes images when we started working on some of our projects. And of course, these are also some of the issues that we found. The mentality of instead of being open by default, you restrict everything first and then you just find exceptions. And specifically this last one, we would like to tell people that it's not enough to release open data. I mean, it's great if you have open data, but it's not enough. You need a community around it. You need people to actually use it. You need a data literate citizenry that will use that open data to actually participate with what the government is doing or participate in their civic duties. So we don't want to build just open data portals. We want to build communities. We want to build people who work around those data portals. Some of the solutions that we've found working on this include literacy and capacity training to our, and then we have an assessment toolkit that helps people and organizations, especially local governments, assess their readiness in terms of where we are in the smart city journey? Are we advanced or are we just starting out? This involves in taking an inventory of their data, be it spatial, non-spatial, and of course, some digital and software inventory just to see where we can, introduce an open source solution to them. We also provide planning, or we also give planning advice and solutions. Our executive director, Chris, is an urban planner, so she has the capacity to do that. She has the expertise, and of course, we also try to foster, the openness mindset and culture. Try try to make sure that there are spaces for, hacker spaces, maker spaces, people who are into these kinds of things, that they have that safe space where they can work, and where they can, grow as individuals, as developers, and as advocates. Just a list down of our projects, before I finish. The things that we've done and the things that we're currently doing. So we have the Smart LGU assessment tool and the Smart LGU assessment research, excerpts of which were the ones that I showed you in the first slides. We looked at the current status of smart cities in the Philippines, and from that, we developed our assessment tool so that we can easily compare where each city or municipality or local government is in terms of where they are in their smart city journey. We also have currently the Mapatanda project, as I've mentioned before. It's mapping with and for older adults and senior citizens utilizing OpenStreetMap. This is inspired by the very vibrant OpenStreetMap community in the Philippines. We have a lot of advocacy mapping groups, and we're currently, I think, the youngest one, the youngest of the bunch. So we have that support system in place, which makes this endeavor at least a bit easier. We're also doing a signature campaign to have people agree on general principles of what it is to be sustainable in terms of digital transformation, and then capacity building for leaders, especially youth leaders, on how to tackle climate change and disasters through open data literacy, and open geospatial applications. And lastly, we're looking at researching the state of open data in Philippine local governments, just to see how it is, where it is in terms of implementation, in terms of openness, and at the same time creating a catalog and inventory of all the smart city projects, so that we can tackle that problem where people don't have, documentation or resources that they can check if for best practices, for pitfalls and things like that. Of course, we won't be here without our partners, which have been with us and have supported us. The municipality of Arteche in the Philippines, we are partnering with them to help them become the first smart and open source municipality in the Philippines. Department of Interior and Local Government, Region 4A, we are part of the advisory committee, and we're trying to help them as well in terms of promoting excellence in local governance in the region. The Open and Agile Smart Cities, and of course the Linux Professional Institute. These are our partners right now, and we're very much always open for partnerships, especially for those who are in the same field as us, for those who advocate and advocate for openness, advocate for free software, and advocate for open data. Thank you very much. I hope you learned a bit about what we do in Smart City. And it's been a pleasure to be here. Hopefully next year we'll meet each other in person. In the meantime, you can get in touch with us at Smart City, info at smartcity.org, smartcity.org, and on our social media pages. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, man. A really good presentation. Quite a good, some good statements there. Some golden ones. Like I really like the one about like data is too important to leave it to data scientists. Really agree on that one. And there's no questions on the shared notes, but I wanted to just go ahead and take the freedom to ask you a few. Did you find well, first, have you do you have any works with? I hope you. I guess you do. With I think I missed it. But do you have any works with government agencies? And do you see problems when you talk about like open source to
Yeah.
these type of agencies? That's usually like a big problem.
Yeah. Not just with my work in smart city and my personal work and my other work as well. We've had to deal with the government. Sometimes I think the main pushback is it's hard to sell openness to the government. It's hard to sell transparency, accountability, and openness sometimes to the government, and being those things being like the main thing about going open source, going open data, it makes it difficult to sell it. So you have to sometimes to reframe it in a way that makes it easier for them to swallow. Although I've had the privilege and I've had the pleasure to work with local governments and government agencies that are very open to these things. For example, our partners, Arteche and the LG4A, they are very open to the idea of opening things up, using open source, using open data. So yeah, it's like a case to case basis. Sometimes you get lucky, but sometimes there's really quite a bit of pushback, especially when it's about ensuring accountability, transparency, and openness in governance. So there's you have to play with both. I guess.
Oh yeah. Glad you found some
Yeah.
holes in the system so you can go through. The last one, I think it's very important. You talked about like some climate change and
Yeah.
disaster related projects. Have you guys done, or do you see something that could be done into the? Because I know Philippines have a long history of problems with floods.
Yeah.
And as climate change becomes a bigger problem, this becomes even bigger. Do you see something that can be done, or have you guys done anything in that direction?
Yeah. Actually, the main reason why we wanted to focus those projects in climate change and disaster is the fact that the Philippines is right smack in the middle of this crisis. I mean, storms or typhoons, volcanoes, you name it, we have it. But yeah, we're just starting off with this project. It's one of the newest ones that we have. But what we're looking at is helping the local governments or partners, first of all, digitize their data, because a lot of the data exists, but most of them aren't in digital ready format, which would allow us to perform the analysis easier. The second one is to standardize and curate it, to standardize and curate that data, and of course to capacitate them to utilize or know existing open technologies that would help them. We're very much open to suggestions as well, because this is we want to pursue, and it's something very new that we want to push, focusing on openness as a means to tackle or to meet the challenge of climate change and disasters in the Philippines.
Nice. There's another question. I think we're running out of time, but if you can answer in the chat, I think it's related. If you can provide some source on the climate and disaster risk governance projects, so maybe if you can drop in some links there.
Yep.
Also, I want to say that it's very very nice that you guys are not only looking at the big cities. Because when we talk about smart cities, everyone thinks about like Singapore. I don't know, like New York, all these San Francisco kind of cities, right? And I also appreciate that you guys are looking into the most, which are like probably the most needed communities, right? Like the small ones out there.
Yes.
And I know you in the Philippines guys have a few of them. Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. Yeah, I hope to see you around, and probably hopefully the next one in person.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. All right, so we're gonna move to our next speaker, Ashish. Are you around? Can you please start sharing your camera and your microphone? I'll give you presentation slides right away. Oh yeah, hello.
Hey, hi, I'm here.
All right, David. Yeah, you should have presenter rights. Should be able to share your screen or upload your.
Okay.